Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Mark Henry. I'm a senior engineer with Opmantek's North American office located in Charlotte, North Carolina. Today, we're going to talk about how to import and configure Opmantek's virtual machine. A few bits of housekeeping before we get started today. We are recording today's session. We'll make it available to everybody who participated in today's webinar. It'll also be available on Opmantek's YouTube channel and also on opmantek.com in our Learn section. So if you go to opmantek.com and look at the menu, there's a section marked Learn. If you go inside there, we have a nice selection of webinars, past webinars, blogs, and industry-related content that's all free for everyone. If you have any questions today, please submit them using the GoToWebinar question and answer section or chat window. So depending on which version of GoToWebinar you're running on your machine, it'll either be presented as the questions panel or as the chat panel. So feel free to submit questions anytime. We do have a couple people here who are going to be monitoring that for us, and we'll try to answer them while we're talking about the subject matter at hand. At the end of today's webinar, or if you leave early, you will be presented with a very short survey. It's just 3 questions. It asks how well I did, how well the webinar content met your needs, and then asks you just an open-ended question about what other content you'd like to see in the future. Please take a moment and complete that survey. We use that information to drive future webinar selection, and we also use it to help provide feedback to myself and to the marketing team here at Opmantek about what subjects work and which ones didn't work. So topics for today, again, we're talking about how to deploy and configure the Opmantek VM. So we're going to talk about how to deploy the virtual machine across various host systems. I'll be using on my Mac OS X today, but we'll talk briefly about some other different types of virtual hosts. We're going to talk about how to resize the VM and how you resize it based on what your kind of estimated future needs are going to be. We'll talk about basic configuration. So after you've imported the VM and after you've resized the VM, what other things do you have to configure on the virtual machine before you actually get up and running? The final thing we're going to touch on is how to maintain the virtual machine. It is important to note that the VM really it's a Linux machine at the end of the day. It's a server, and once you spin it up in your environment, it is your responsibility to patch and maintain that server, and then also upgrade and maintain the various Opmantek modules that ship with it, that you are licensing and that you're using in your environment. So we'll talk about those pieces as well and how to work them into your DevOps process. So start off, a few references. Don't worry about trying to do screen caps or copy down the URLs. We have made this presentation available as a PDF. If you're watching the GoToWebinar today live, you can download it in the GoToWebinar handouts panel right now. If you're on YouTube or if you're viewing this on opmantek.com, please come to opmantek.com, go to the Learn section, and we'll have a PDF version of this available for you to download. Again, opmantek.com, go to the Learn section in the menu, find this presentation under Webinars, and we'll have both the video recording and the PDF version. And so you'll have all of these different URLs in this. Today's presentation does have quite a few of outside URLs that we reference to. Some of the longer ones we've used tinyurl.com to shrink down just to make them visually fit on the screen. So again, please feel free to grab the handout from the GoToWebinar handouts panel or come to opmantek.com to the Learn section and find the webinar, and you can find the PDF there to download. But a few references for you here. We do have the first one, the installation and getting started. That goes back directly to the Opmantek wiki. We do have a whole section, several pages on installing and configuring the Opmantek virtual machine. We also have a direct link to the Opmantek downloads page. Of course, if you don't want to try to memorize that URL, just go to opmantek.com, look at the menu, and select Downloads. And finally, we do have a reference to the CentOS and Yum Update manual page. So this goes back directly to the core page, the core reference page for doing a Yum update. We'll present a couple other options later on in today's presentation and the appropriate URLs as well. So without further ado, let's get started on today's session, how to deploy the Opmantek VM. So Opmantek offers a good selection of solutions that are in the device discovery and performance and fault monitoring range of network monitoring of NMS solutions. And those include our core NMIS, which is for performance and fault monitoring, Open Audit, which is a scalable device discovery and auditing solution, OP Charts, which is a dynamic interactive charting and custom dashboarding tool, OP Events, which is a powerful intelligent event response tool. So where NMIS can do performance and fault monitoring and notifications and do basic escalations, OP Events builds on that and actually does proactive event response. So it fixes things before you even know that they're broken. We also have a configuration compliance tool in OP Config. We have an executive reporting system in OP Reports. We have a very, very strong predictive analytics engine in OP Trend that I recommend all of you take a look at. If you're looking to scale out, if you have a lot of assets that you want to monitor, or if they're spread out in a large geographic area, then you really want to look at OPHA, which allows you to do multi-tenancy, do high availability. It allows you to scale horizontally as well as vertically, so you can have a layer of polling engines spread out across your geography, whether that's kind of a physical geography or a logical geography across your network, reporting up to one or more master servers that could be within your network or out in the cloud. For a very strong NetFlow and IPFix analysis engine called OPFlow, and a lightweight IPAM system called OPAddress. When you look at Opmantek's virtual machine, the VM comes pre-installed and pre-configured with everything on this list except for the 3 items in red. So again, the virtual machine does not include OP Trend, OPHA, or OPAddress. However, if you are evaluating Opmantek solutions and you've downloaded the VM and you've gotten the free 50 device or the included free 20 device trial, and you've enabled those, and you Trend or OPHA or OPAddress, contact us at contact@opmantek.com. Our sales team would be happy to get you the download information, talk you through how to install it and add it to the VM, and then get you a trial license for 15 or 30 days so you can take a look at those tools and add them into your evaluation of our solution set. So what are the basic steps, right? So let's start with the overall concept that the virtual machine is actually provided as a courtesy to Opmantek's clients, right? So it's made for you to be able to download a single image, get it up, get it running in 10 or 15 minutes, have everything ready to go that you want to be able to take a look at, or at least most people want to look at, whether you're doing a proof of concept or a trial. Many of our customers also use it for deploying solutions long term. So they'll actually download the VM and they'll spin it up, they'll pre-configure it, they'll then make a new OVA of that original VM with all of their own internal configurations and selections in it, and then they can push that out across their architecture, so they can put it in whichever locations they need to. The current virtual machine comes from a build which was done this past January. Again, that's January 31st of 2018, for those of you who are watching this somewhere off in the future. The VM is based on CentOS 6.9, and it was fully patched as of the build date, January 31st. So today is July 17th. We're a full 7 months later. So if you were to download that today, you of course want to be able to patch the operating system, patch the installed applications like Apache, and then also upgrade all of the Opmantek modules as well, because there have been releases since that last January 31st build. You can get the latest version of the Opmantek VM from the Opmantek downloads page. Again, simply go to opmantek.com, select downloads, and then you'll be able to pick the product you want. Simply select the virtual machine as the first item on the page, download it, and then you can open it up in your VM hosting system. It is now packaged as an OVA file. It was an OVF prior to the January 31st build. We find that the OVA is not only smaller, but gives us more control, and it's also better for interoperability. So it can be imported into or converted into a format that can be imported into more types of host systems than other versions that we were using previously. For those of you who are using Docker containers, I'm sorry, but we don't have a Docker version of the virtual machine available yet. We have had a couple clients build both standalone Open Audit Docker containers or NMIS Docker containers, but we haven't had anyone put together or request a Docker container of the entire virtual machine. If that's an important consideration for you, contact us. Let us know. Write to contact@opmantek.com. Let them know what your needs are. We love to hear from our clients, and all of our features, all of the things that we offer, whether it's downloads or webinars or our features within products, are all driven by customer demand. So if you need our tools in Docker containers, let us know. The virtual machine as it stands is actually sized for what we consider a small deployment. And we'll go into deployment sizes in a minute. We'll talk about what different sizes look like, what different options there are, and how they impact the size of the VM. The important thing, though, in this kind of step one is just what do you do? How do you get the product down? Where do you go from that starting point, and what do you do with it? So the OVA is directly compatible with both VMware, VMware Fusion, and VirtualBox. You do have to convert the OVA for use in Hypervisor or Hyper-V. I understand VMware vSphere, you can import the OVA directly as well. There have been some reports of some users of Hyper-V. Our VM makes use of two different disk drives internally, and it's been my understanding that there are some versions of Hyper-V which have problems importing the VM. It'll import the first drive, but not the second. We're not sure exactly which version that is, but I do understand that upgrading Hyper-V to the most recent version alleviates that issue. So let's switch over now, and let's take a look at what that import looks like. So what I've done is I've already downloaded a copy of the VM. It's on my desktop. This is VMware Fusion. I'm simply going to import my OVA. It's going to ask me to choose an existing virtual machine. I'm going to choose File, select my desktop, select the OVA image itself, and you can see that this is 920 megabytes in size. So I'm going to import that. I'll click Continue. It's going to allow me to save that image and give it a specific name. I'm just going to leave the same name that the file has here. I can add additional tags to it if I want to. And it's actually going to copy this from my desktop into a subdirectory called Virtual Machines. Again, this is just a feature of VMware Fusion as part of the VMware Fusion configuration. And this is going to take a minute or two to import. While this is importing, we're going to go ahead and step over back to the presentation. And we're talking about the guidelines for resizing the VM. So what are the things that impact server resources and server sizing? So when it comes to resizing the VM, you have to understand which Opmantek products you're going to be using, how they're going to be used, right? So how often are they going to be used, how many devices, how many services, etc., how many concurrent discoveries. The more things that are being done in any of those products, the more products that are being used, the more concurrent users that are using something like the OP Charts dashboarding tools. All of those drive towards needing either more RAM, more CPU, faster disk speed, more network speed, or a few of them, like OP Reports, has a very low impact. Again, the items in red are not included on the VM. So I did include how they do impact the sizing of a VM. So if you do choose to add, let's say, OP Trend onto the Opmantek virtual machine, then you'll need to consider how many devices are being trended by OP Trend, and perhaps consider increasing your CPU and your RAM. So basic sizing considerations. So again, the Opmantek VM comes shipped based on small. So it'll support NMIS strongly. We recommend basically 60 gigabytes of storage. The VM now actually comes with a total of 80 gigabytes, 40 on the operating system slash programs partition, and 40 gigabytes on the data partition. It does come sized with 2 gigabytes of RAM, 2 virtual CPU. That will support that little VM with 2 gigabytes of memory and 2 virtual CPU. It'll support up to 500 devices or 2,000 elements. Now, what we're calling an element is any combination of device, server, interface, all of those pieces, all of those threads are considered an element. Now, when you get into actually licensing our solutions, and I don't want to make this a sales discussion, but when you get into licensing our solutions, we license almost everything except for OP Flow based on the total number of devices you're using in the product. So, for example, OP Charts is based on the total number of devices that NMIS is managing. OP Reports, same thing. The reporting engine drives and is licensed to the total number of devices in NMIS. But OP Config, our configuration compliance engine, is licensed based on the total number of devices that you want to manage configurations for. So maybe you only want to manage configurations for your network routers or your core devices, etc. And so you might have a subset of the total number of devices on your machine in that. A medium size implementation might be 80 gigs of storage, 4 gigs of memory, and 4 virtual CPU. That would get you up to about 1,500 devices or 8,000 elements. You could go to 160 gigabytes, 8 gigabytes of memory, 4 CPU. So we're not very CPU intensive, you'll notice. And that to around 2,500 devices or 14,000 elements. OP Flow is a little different than the applications themselves. OP Flow generally, you want to start with something greater than 160 gigabytes of storage, and anywhere from 8 to 16 gigabytes of memory, and at least 4 virtual CPU. Although frankly, I would really recommend somewhere between 6 and 8 CPU. OP Flow tends to be more memory intensive than CPU, but if you want to be able to spawn multi-threads and handle multiple flows at once, and process all of those, then you need to have more CPU as well. The big driving factor as you get to larger and larger systems handling more and more data is not necessarily CPU and memory, but instead storage speed. How fast can you read and write information that's coming into the server to your storage system? We really recommend solid state SSD cards rather than spinning hard drives, even the fastest hard drives, the Seagate Blacks, etc. The data exchange in there can just be too slow, especially if you have them arranged in a complex RAID array. So we have some tools to help you out. If you have problems reading and writing data, if you're getting errors from the system, let us know. We have some tools that can help not necessarily speed up the read and write operations, but test the read and write operations and let you know when they're not quite meeting the needs that you have. So I'm going to switch back over to VMware Fusion. So we're all done. We've imported it now. You can see that we have 2 gigabytes of memory. We have 2 CPU cores. It also has a mounted CD/DVD and a USB controller. Now I can customize these settings now if I want to. So I can actually change my processors and memories. This happens again to be a function of VMware Fusion. Each of the different products are similar. In some of them, you have to import the VM first, and then you can adjust its size. There are a few products on the marketplace where you can actually reset the size of the VM before the import happens. But for example, here I have up to I can assign up to 8 gigabytes of memory. I've got 2, and I can give it up to 4 core processors. Again, this is all running on a small laptop. So this is an OS X machine. I'm running Mac OS High Sierra. I've got a 3 gigahertz Intel Core i7 processor and 16 gigabytes of RAM. So this machine is about 5 years old at this point, and I can still run between 2 and 3 virtual machines simultaneously on this platform. So the VMware Fusion implementation under OS X is actually pretty good. I'm not going to make any changes to this. We're just going to go ahead and fire up this VM. Now, VMware Fusion actually wants to upgrade the virtual machine support for it. So I'm going to let that upgrade, and then it's going to start the VM. It's going to take a little bit of time for that to get started. It takes a few minutes the first time it runs. So while that's going, let's move forward on our presentation. So basic configuration requirements. So we've imported the virtual machine now into our virtual machine host. We've resized it if we needed to, right? And again, you can change the number of CPUs, you can change the amount of RAM, you can increase the hard drive space. If you need to increase the hard drive space, it's very, very easy to do in VMware. You simply select your drive, you add size to it. There is a process on the Opmantek wiki that you have to walk through as well to actually tell CentOS, tell the LVM system there, that it's to absorb the additional space and assign it to those 2 drives. So just follow that, and the link is provided in this presentation for that as well. So there's a few other things that you want to be able to do. Obviously, you need to be able to sign into the shell or the console, right? So right off the bat, you need to know what the root credentials are. We ship with a default set of root credentials for the virtual machine. You should change those. In fact, all of these standard credentials that ship on the virtual machine, that should be one of the first things you do, is change the root credentials, change the web credentials for the web interfaces for the products, change the backend credentials for the databases, etc. And we do cover all of those processes as well during the setup on the Opmantek wiki. But once you've logged in, you'll want to configure your network connection, whether you're using a static IP or DHCP. You'll want to set the host name. If you're not using peer DNS, if you're not using DHCP, you may want to set your DNS name servers. We have installed or pre-installed and pre-configured NTP as well. We're using the CentOS NTP server pool for NTP. If you're doing NTP, if you have an NTP server locally, which you should have, you may want to point at least one of those 4 references to your local NTP server as well. And of course, anytime you make changes to the basic network configuration of your server, you'll want to restart your network services. So let's take a look back at the VM. It should be going now. All right. Again, the root password and credentials are all on the web page that's covered in the background here. We've got this link. So now that I'm here, we could take a look. I am in the root folder right off. So if I do a simple ls -l, in fact, sorry about that. So I can see that I actually have two configurations that Opmantek ships with the VM. So these are pre-configured interface config files for the Ethernet 0 interface. So we have one for DHCP and one for static setup. And if I just take a look at one of those, so I'm just going to run up Vim and take a look. So this one happens to be for the DHCP interface. You'll notice that peer DNS is yes in here. So you don't have to actually name a DNS server. It'll actually reach out to your DHCP system and ask it what the DNS servers are, and then it'll pre-configure everything based on what it gets from your upstream systems. So you can copy those over. Those are pre-done for you. If you're looking at your host name, of course, the host name that we ship with happens to be Opmantek. So you can change that host name. And you should make sure that you're getting good time service. So HTTPD is running, and I can check date and make sure that I'm getting that as well. The server is now configured for UTC time. Before that January 31st build, it used to be done for AEST, so Australian Eastern Standard Time. Again, now it goes with it ships with UTC. Let me just clear that. And the last thing to go over today really is maintaining the virtual machine. So it's important to understand that the VM itself, again, it's completely patched as of the day it was built. But the current version of the VM was built January 31st, 2018. So it's now nearly 7 months behind. However, as long as the server has internet access, you can make use of CentOS's subscription to Yum. So if we just do Yum update, and there's actually a whole pile of options that are available with Yum. So I can actually pull down a list of what updates are available, what packages are installed, when were they last updated. I can pull down all kinds of crazy stuff, or I can simply tell it to run a Yum update. And what Yum will do is the server will reach out to Yum. It'll say, I have all of these packages installed, and which ones actually have something that's worth updating. So it's actually updating the Yum database now. It's grabbing information. It's going to build a new database of all the applications that are on the server, where they're located, and now it's going to start making a list of all of the packages that need to be updated. There's a total of 245 megabytes across 79 packages. So I'm going to go ahead and let that go. So again, even if you don't upgrade any of the Opmantek modules, if you say, hey, the versions from Opmantek are good enough, you should run a Yum update on your server. It's your server. Many of these updates are going to be in response to underlying security vulnerabilities, bug patches, fixes, upgrades, better support for different types of applications or industry standards. So if nothing else, run a Yum update before you put this server into service. While that's running, let's head back over to the presentation for a moment. The last thing you should look at is once you've updated the server, once you've patched the server, using Yum Update. The next thing you want to do is to download, install the most recent versions of any Opmantek modules. So if you're using OpenAudit, for example, the Opmantek VM ships with version 2.2.0. However, the most recent version is 2.2.6. And there are a ton of bug fixes in those 6 releases. There's a couple of security patches that are in there as well. There's improved troubleshooting and error handling and correction that are behind the scenes. And there's a much more robust LDAP support. So all of that's covered under the modular releases pages on the Opmantek Wiki. So if you just go to the Opmantek Wiki and then look up your product and then go to the releases page for that product, it'll tell you what things have been upgraded. The easiest way of knowing whether something is upgraded or not, once you've finished your Yum update and the system's up and running, and you've set your host name and you've got all those little pieces going, you can actually just bring up this page. So you'll notice in the URL bar, now we happen to have SSL set up as well, so we have certs that we've installed, and we've switched over to HTTPS. But if you go to just your IP address /OMK, you'll get a list of every single application, and more importantly, it'll give you a version, and it'll tell you if that little pill shape is red, it'll be out of it'll be old, it'll be replaceable, and there'll be a link inside the text underneath it, which will tell you where you can go, what the download link is for the upgrade. In the top right-hand corner, you'll also notice on this page that there's a nice little check here. This is actually checking the MongoDB, which is the big data backend for all of Opmantek solutions, and it's checking to make sure that the big data backend is up, is operational, and can be communicated with. So it's a nice little kind of round robin check of the entire application chain there. So let's go back. Let's take a look. Let's see how this is doing now. So it's still downloading pieces. So you can see out of those 79 packages, some of those packages have other packages that they rely on, and Yum will actually download all those. It'll compile them if necessary. It'll make them into the final version based on the operating system and the type of processor that you have. So Yum is taking care of all of that work behind the scenes for you. It's not something that you need to take care of. You need to worry about. You can just let this go. It takes usually about 10 to 15 minutes the first time you do an upgrade. But again, the more time it's been since the last build, since when the VM was created, generally speaking, the more patches that are going to be downloaded and installed. So once you have an idea of which Opmantek modules you want to upgrade, which ones have upgrades that are available, which ones you want to upgrade, again, go back to the Opmantek downloads page, which is opmantek.com/network-tools-download, or you can just go to opmantek.com and select download from the menu. And you can download each of those. You can download them to your desktop, or what I do is I capture the URL for the download, and then I'll just simply go to the command line and use wget at the command line to download them directly onto the VM. That is if the VM still has internet access at that point. If you have questions about the installers, we have a link here as well for the installer instructions. That one's kind of a generic page. Each of the individual products also have a little bit of a write-up that's specific to them. So if you really want to know about the installer for OP Charts, for example, you could go to the OP Charts section of the Opmantek Wiki. Right on the home page, there'll be a link from there on how to install or upgrade OP Charts. And it's important to understand that all of our installers, all of the Opmantek installers, are also upgrade installers. So whether it's a brand new installation on a server you just set up, or whether you're starting from the Opmantek VM and you need to upgrade an existing installation, the installer is smart enough to understand what you want to do, and it'll either do a fresh install or it'll do an upgrade of an existing install on that server. So you don't have to worry about that part of the puzzle either. All right, that concludes our overview today of the Opmantek VM. I hope this little webinar has been helpful for you and useful. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at markh@opmantek.com. If you forget that, you can also hit us at support@opmantek.com or contact@opmantek.com. Thank you all very much for your time. I look forward to seeing you at a future webinar.